Hi, this is Mike McCrease. Welcome once again to Advanced Photoshop. In this lesson we're going to learn two different techniques, one for creating fire effect, one for creating an ice effect. So it's kind of a fire and ice combination tutorial here, two tutorials combined into one. Oftentimes we like to create a fire effect and don't exactly know how, and so here we're going to cover both those, fire and ice. I'm going to start by opening the Dancer JPEG file that I've downloaded from Blackboard into Photoshop. I'll go to my Layers panel, and I'm going to rename background layer Dancer, and I'm going to convert it to a smart object. Now the reason I'm converting this to a smart object is so that I preserve the original pixels in the image. And so here we have the picture of the dancer, and what we're going to do is make her look like she is made of fire, just literally a fire dancer. Now we've got a really tight composition here, and I think we're going to need a little bit of extra space. So I'm going to increase my canvas size. So let's choose Image and Canvas Size. We're going to make certain that we've got a check mark in the relative option box. And I'm going to add 3 inches to the width, 2 inches to the height, and we want to make certain that the center tile of our anchor grid is selected, and click OK. You see that we now have increased our height and width, but that area is transparent. So in my Layers panel, I'm going to create a new layer. I'll hold down my Control or Command key and click on the New Layer button, and that puts my new layer underneath my Dancer layer, and I'll just fill that with white paint. So here's my new image with additional white space around it. Next, I'm going to add a filter to the Dancer layer. Make certain that it's active, and we're going to choose Filter, Stylize, and Find Edges. This kind of makes it somewhat like a line drawing. It's got some color in there which I want to discard, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'll create an adjustment layer for hue and saturation, and I'll completely desaturate it by dragging the saturation slider all the way to the left. Next, I want to increase my contrast so that I have some good rich blacks in there. So I'll create another adjustment layer, this one for levels, and I'll take my shadow slider. I'm going to drag that to the right just until we get near the base of our histogram, right about there. Now I'll create just one more adjustment layer. This one will be invert, just to make it a white image on a black field. Now let's open up our Channels panel. I'm going to load the RGB composite channel as a selection. Actually, what I'll be doing is loading the luminosity as a selection. So I'll hold down my Control or Command key and click on that channel thumbnail. Now I'm going to go back to my Layers panel, make certain that your topmost layer, our invert adjustment layer, is active, and I'm going to create a new layer which I'm going to call Fire. Now my luminosity is still loaded as a selection. I'm going to fill this selection with white. Now I can deselect at this point. Let me turn off these bottom layers just to show you what's going on here. I hope you can see this, but all we've done is we loaded that channel as a selection and filled it with white. Let's add a layer style to our fire layer. I'm going to choose Outer Glow, and for my color picker I'm going to choose a fiery red, and I'll set my blend mode to hard light. I'll increase my opacity to 100%. I'll put this out of the way so you can see a little bit better what's happening here. So I've increased my opacity to 100%, and I'll increase the size to 25 or 30 pixels. Next, I'll choose the Inner Glow style, and I'm going to set the Inner Glow color to an orange yellow. I'll set the blending mode this to hard light as well. Opacity to 100%. And the size to 5. And now you can see my figure is already starting to look kind of fiery. Actually, I think it's a little on the yellow side, so I'm going to go back to my Inner Glow and change that color up a little bit. Make it a little more on the red side. Next, let's make 2 duplicates of our fire layer. So we now have Fire, Fire Copy, and Fire Copy 2. On Fire Copy 2, I'm not going to use these layer effects, so I'm just going to click and drag them over to the trash can. And I'll set my blend mode to overlay. Changing the blend mode to overlay helps to intensify the fire effect. Next, I'm ready to start creating the actual flames. So I'm going to go to the Fire Copy layer, and I'm going to locate my smudge tool, which is hidden beneath your blur tool. And I'm going to change my brush size. Let's go over here to our brush picker, and we're going to change the size to about, let's try 50 pixels. Doesn't have to be exact, that's just kind of a ballpark figure. And the hardness I'll set at 75%. And I'll set my strength to 60%. Now I'm going to zoom into her hand so you can see a little bit better about what's going to take place at this point. Again, I got my smudge tool selected, and I'm going to move over to her hand, and I'm going to click and drag off to the left like this. And it takes those orange pixels and kind of drags them out to create a fire. And I can just drag to the left, and I can drag back to the right again, and just going back and forth, and I create a really nice fire effect. So this is the really fun part. Just try and create as much fire as you want. And don't worry if you create too much, because if you overdo it, you can just create a layer mask for your fire copy layer, and you can hide any of those effects that you may have overdone. And it's easy to overdo it. But just kind of twirl it around, shift it to the left and to the right and back again, and just have some fun with it. And at any time if your fire doesn't look quite right as far as the color is concerned, all you have to do is go to your inner glow or your outer glow panels and change the color to something that you might think would be a little more appropriate. So you can always come back and change those because it's just a layer style. Okay, so a little bit of time has passed and I've worked on the fire a little bit more, and here's what I've got so far. And I'm making all my fire kind of go off behind her. She's jumping off to our right, so it seems logical that the flames would go off to the left. I'm also going to create some sparks too, that as she moves off to the right, these sparks will be flying off to the left. And I'll do that by going back to my fire copy layer, and I'm going to add a drop shadow to it. I'm going to set the color to a red-orange. It's going to be the color of my sparks. I'm going to change the blending mode to dissolve. And you can see how we're creating sparks just by using our drop shadow effect in a fresh way. Let's set our angle to 0 degrees so that they go all the way to the left. And I'm going to keep my size at about 5 pixels, and I'll adjust my distance out so you can decide how far you want your sparks to appear, and you can adjust the opacity to suit your tastes. None of these options are cast in stone. These are just kind of general guidelines. So you see if I increase the size, it increases the sparks, but if I get it too high, you see that it starts to throw the sparks on both sides of the figure. And so by just keeping it at about 5 pixels, we'll keep it on the left side. Now let's have a little more fun with it. Let's go to our original fire layer, not the fire copy, but the fire layer, and let's apply a Gaussian blur filter to it. Filter, blur, Gaussian. And the options panel that opens up, I'm just going to drag my radius slider to the right a ways until I get a nice glow to it. And you can experiment how much you want it to glow. It's kind of up to you. And click OK. Now some of my lines inside the figure are a little bit too well defined, so I'm going to go to my fire copy layer, and with my smudge tool I'm going to kind of blur those out a little bit too. And I can go to the fire copy 2 layer because those same lines are there as well. We can kind of play with those. And then at this point I can just kind of fine-tune the image. I still think my fire is a little on the yellow side, so I can just go to my fire copy layer and adjust the inner glow to see if I can get a little bit better color. Or maybe just adjust the opacity a bit, whatever works best for us. Again, because we set our blending mode to hard light, that changes things a bit. So with a little bit of experimentation, you can find what's suitable for you. And there's our finished fire dancer. Our next effect is to create an ice effect, and we're going to apply it to a text object. You can do this with any object, but it works really well with text, and it can be a nice decorative thing that you can do if you're working on an illustration, or you need a nice ice effect that might, for example, work with a particular story that you are illustrating. So let's get started with that one now. Let's create a new file, and let's call it ice. We're going to make it 8 by 10 inches. .72 pixels per inch, and click OK. I'm going to create a gradient for my background that's going to be blue. It's going to go from a dark blue to a lighter blue and then back dark again. So I'm going to go to my gradient tool, and then I'll go to my options bar, and I'm not going to click the drop down menu. Instead, I'm actually going to click on the gradient editor. Just clicking on this field right here that displays your gradient. And it's here in my gradient editor that I'm going to create a new gradient. Down underneath my gradient bar in the lower portion of the gradient editor, we have two little color stops, one on the left and one on the right. I'm going to double click the one on the left to change the color. In my red, green, and blue values, I'm going to make some changes there. I'm going to set the red all the way to 0. I'll set the green to 50 and the blue to 100. Click OK. I'll do the same thing with the color stop on the right side. Double click, set the red to 0, green to 50, blue to 100. Next, I'll add another color stop just underneath. Just move my cursor underneath here, and I'm going to click and double click on my new color stop. And here I'm going to set the red to 0, the green to 100, and the blue to 155. Click OK. And I'm going to set the position of my color stop to 75. I can just, over here in my location box, I can just type in 75 there. I'll give it a name. I'll just call it Blue Gradient. Click on the New button, and it saves it right over here. Now click OK. Next, I'll go to my Layers panel, and I'll create a new layer, which I will call Backdrop. And making certain that my gradient is set to the linear gradient, I'm going to start at the top, click and drag down, and then press Shift to make certain I draw a nice straight line. I'm going to drag it all the way to the bottom of our layer like that to apply our newly created gradient. For the time being, I'm just going to turn off that layer, just hide it for a while. Next, I'm going to go to my Type tool, and I'm going to choose a nice heavy font like Impact. Impact should be installed on both Macintosh and PC platforms. I'm going to set the size to 350 points. It's going to be really big text here. Make certain that the color is black, and I'll just type in ice. Now my letters are a little bit close together, so I'm going to select those. Holding down the Option key, I'll press my right arrow button on the keyboard to move them a little bit further apart. Then I'll press Control or Command A to select all, making certain that my selection tool is active, and I will center that on my canvas. Now I don't want it smack dab in the middle of my canvas, so I'm going to deselect and just move it up like this. We're going to have a reflection displayed, and so I want to make certain that my reflection is, we have enough room for our reflection underneath our text. I'm going to be distorting my text here to make it look like it's kind of melted ice. And I'm going to want to place a guideline underneath it so that I don't distort the bottom of the text. So I know where my limits are for that. So I'm going to turn on my rulers, Control R, pull down a guideline, and we're going to put it right at the bottom of our text there. And you see that the letter C actually goes beneath this baseline. So I'm going to have to nudge that up just a little bit. So I'm going to go back to my text tool, select just the letter C, and we'll go to our character panel. I'll go to my baseline shift options, and I can just click and drag on this little icon over here, and I drag it to the right a little bit just until it rests right on that baseline. So now it's time to use the Liquify filter to distort our text to make it look like ice. I'll choose Filter and Liquify. It's going to ask me if I need to rasterize, if I'm willing to rasterize the text, and I'll click on OK. And our panel for our Liquify filter opens up. I'm going to choose the Forward Warp tool. Then over in the options on the right hand side, I'm going to set the brush size to 75. The density to 50. And the brush pressure to 75. Down at the bottom, I'm going to choose Show Backdrop. And where it says Use, I'm going to change that to Background. I'll also click on the Show Mesh option so I can see my mesh. If you like, you can change your mesh color. I'll change it to red just so that we can see it a little bit better. And then what I'm going to do is just manipulate my text, just make it kind of bumpy. Don't get too carried away, especially in the corners. They do some weird things, but we just want to make it look like it's kind of all melty. Now let's take special care when we get to the bottom of our text, because we want to keep the bottom of it flat. So again, we're just trying to make it look like it is made out of ice. The ice is kind of lumpy. Maybe it's a little on the melty side. Just have a little bit of fun with it. And you see the way the Liquify filter is working. We're actually pushing this mesh around. And this mesh acts sort of like a magnet for the pixels, and so wherever the mesh goes, the pixels follow. And again, I'm going to leave the bottom of the E flat. You can experiment with some of the other tools if you want, such as the bloat tool and the pucker tool, the push left tool, just if you want to kind of play with those a little bit. That's just up to you. When you've got it distorted the way you want it to, we're just going to click on OK. I can turn my rulers off now if I like. And I'm going to apply a filter to my text. That filter is the Render Clouds filter. So I'm going to go to my Layers panel, and in my text layer I'm going to lock the transparency by clicking on this little transparency button. What that does is it makes certain that the filter that I'm about to apply only affects the text and doesn't affect the rest of the image, none of the transparency around it. So I'm going to press D on my keyboard to make certain that my colors are set to black and white. Foreground is black, background is white. And I'll choose Filter, Render, and Clouds. And if you don't like the effect, this is kind of a random effect. If you don't like that, you can just press Control or Command F and it will apply a different algorithm to it. And just find one that looks kind of cloudy like this. Next, I'm going to apply a stroke to the text, which is going to help define it a little bit more once it starts looking a little more realistic. So I'm going to choose Edit and Stroke. Set the color to black. It should be defaulted to that already. I'm going to make it 3 pixels. And set the location to inside. So it places it inside the edge of our text. I'm going to smooth out my text a little bit by applying a Gaussian Blur filter to it. Filter, Blur, and Gaussian. And let's try setting that radius to about 3 pixels. Gives it a nice little blur just where my 3 pixel stroke has been applied to it. Now let's duplicate this text layer and we'll hide the copy for now. Let's go back to our original ice layer and apply another filter. Let's choose Filter, Artistic, Plastic Wrap. In our panels, we're going to set the highlight strength to 15, our detail to 1, and our smoothness to 15. Click OK. Now let's go back to our ice copy layer and we're going to apply a different filter to this. I'll choose Filter, Sketch. Got to turn it back on first. Okay, then choose Filter and Sketch and choose Chrome. I'll set my detail to 0 and my smoothness to 10. Click OK. Next, let's make our gradient layer visible once again. Let's take the blending mode of both ice layers and change it to overlay. So now we're getting the ice effect looking pretty good. But we need to enhance our ice. So let's go to the original ice layer. I'm going to copy that. Change the copy's blending mode to hard light. Makes it a little more pronounced. Now let's go to the ice copy layer. Going to copy this one. Change its blending mode to hard light as well. This will bring out the highlights and help define the detail. To make the text a little more readable, let's take this top layer Make certain that ice copy 3 is selected. And we're going to drop the opacity about 50 or 60%. You can kind of experiment. Yours is going to look a little bit different than mine, because when we applied our clouds filter, the pattern that you choose is probably a little bit different than mine. So you can kind of adjust that to where it suits you. I can turn off my guideline by pressing Control Command semicolon. Now let's add a reflection to it. We'll start by shift-clicking all the ice layers. I've got my top layer selected. I'll move down to the bottom one, shift-click on it to select all of them. And then I'll press Control Command G to put them into a layer group. I'll drag this to the new Layer button to make a copy of it. I'll choose Edit, Transform, and Flip Vertical. And then I'll move it underneath the original layer group. Just going to nudge it right until they touch right on their baselines like that. Then I'll drop the opacity of the copied group to about 50% or so. And then to finish it off, I'll create an adjustment layer for either curves or levels above group 1 to brighten the image. All I do is take my highlight slider, drag that to the left until we get to the base of our histogram, right about there. There's our finished ice effect. And of course you can modify this playing with some of the settings, adjust your gradients, you can modify the contrast on your background layer, whatever looks good for you. Make it look realistic, make certain that your ice is nice and legible. Okay, so fire and ice effects, easy, fun. Send those to me on Blackboard, and I look forward to talking with you again. And this is Mike McCrease.